Hey, welcome back to Rithmetic with Ron. Today we're going to answer the question, how do we calculate a percent increase? Something was a certain price, now it's more. How do we do that kind of math? I'm going to show you in today's video. Let's start our discussion about percent increase with a picture or a diagram so that we understand what we're talking about. If I take this pie here, and let's say that I cut it up into 5 pieces. Let's pretend that I'm a good artist and that these are all equal, okay? Well, if you have 5 pieces that are all equal, each of them are 20%, okay? And the reason we know this is because if we take 100% and we divide it by 5, we would get 20%, okay? And that's math that you can check on your own if you're curious. Something divided up into 5 equal pieces, each piece by itself is 20%. So if we talk about a percent increase, this is 100% right here if I have all 5 pieces, the whole pie. What if I want to add 20% more? Well, what I'm really doing is I'm adding this guy. Let's pretend that this guy right here is the same as these other pie slices. 20% more means I have whatever I started with, and now I'm going to add another chunk to it so that at the end I have more than I started. Now, that seems kind of simple, but what this helps us to understand is that 100% plus 20%, well, if I add these together, I get 120%. How can you have 120% of something if 100% is the whole thing? Well, just like the diagram shows us, we started with something, and then we said, now we're going to add more to it. So at the end, we have more than what we started with. I had 5 pieces of pie. I got one from somewhere else, and so now there's more than what I started with. Okay? Let's remember back also that if we have 120%, we can remember that moving the decimal point 2 places to the left will convert a percentage into a decimal. This now becomes the multiplier. So if I take something and I multiply it by 1.2, I have just made it grow by 20%, and now it's bigger. And let's do an example. Let's say that you're out shopping and you want to buy a pair of shoes, and in your mind you had it in your memory that there was a pair of shoes you wanted that was $50, but then you find out, let's say that you see a sign, you go into the store, and it says now everything has increased in prices 20%, okay? Call it inflation, call it whatever you want to. Things are now more expensive. So now the shoes are 20% more than what they were, okay? So if this is your $50 pair of shoes, now whatever that price was, we're gonna take 20% of it and add that on top. So we know that the shoes are gonna be more expensive, okay? Well, that 20% more is like this. Taking the 100%, that was your $50, okay? Then we're gonna add 20% more of $50, and that's gonna equal 120%. The price went up, okay? So there's 2 ways you can do this. See how we did this 1.2 multiplier? It's 120% with the decimal point moved over to turn the percentage into a decimal. If I take 50 and I multiply it by 1.2, you can check this on a calculator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the 0 and take 5 times 1.2, which is 6, and then I'm going to add the 0 on the end. So we started with a $50 pair of shoes. We multiplied by 1.2 and we got $60. Okay, that's one way to do it. Taking the percent increase, adding it to 100%, turning it into a decimal, and multiplying by what you started with. The other way to do this is to recognize that if $50 was the whole thing, and then we want to add 20% more, well, we need to know what 20% of $50 is. Okay, $50 times 20%. Okay, well, 20% is the same if you move the decimal point as 0.20. Percentage, decimal, same value, okay? So if I take $50 and I multiply by 0.2, okay? When I do this math, I'm going to end up with $10. You can check that in a calculator if you want to. $10. Now, that $10 is not the new price. That's the adder. We started with $50, but the 20% that I added is $10. So $50 plus $10 is $60, which is the same answer that we got over here, okay? So you can either add the percentage to 100 at the beginning and get a multiplier that's bigger than 1, and that's what we did here. Or you can say that percentage, I'm going to calculate how much that is. 20% of $50 was $10. That's what I need to add to the original. 50 plus 10 is 60, and either way, you get the same answer. As we do these problems, it might be helpful to really quickly review how do we multiply with decimals, okay? I know in the previous problem I went through it kind of quick. It said you can check it in a calculator. Real quick, here's how I do problems like this. I know that I have one digit to the right of the decimal, okay? I have a whole number, 70, and 1.2. So I know that I have one space to the right of the decimal. I'm going to keep track of that, and then I'm going to get rid of the decimal and multiply these as whole numbers and then put the decimal back, okay? Now, as I look at 70 times 12, this number is a multiple of 10, okay? So in my mind, I'm going to say 7 times 12, and then at the end, to get to 70, I'm going to multiply by 10. Now I've taken something that used to have a decimal and a big number, and I've broken it down into something small. 7 times 12 is 84. I know that from my times tables. But we're not multiplying by 12 or by 7, we're multiplying by 70. So I'm going to add that 0 back on, and then I'm going to go back and remember that I had one digit to the right of the decimal. So where do I put the decimal so that I have one digit to the right? I put it right here, okay? And so if you go back and check this from the very beginning, that's the wrong place, 70 times 1.2 is the same as 84, okay? Just a friendly, helpful reminder on how to multiply with decimals, which is something that's useful when we do these problems with percentages. All right, let's try another example. What if there is a 30% increase on the cost of movie tickets? And let's say that a movie ticket costs $15, okay? $15 movie ticket, and the price is going to go up 30%. How do we calculate this? Well, let's really quickly review. We can either say that this whole pie is $15, and we know that we're breaking it up in percentages, and we're going to take one of those pieces and add it like this and get a new total. That's one way. Or the other way is to say that we're starting with a full price of $15. That was 100% of the cost of a movie ticket, but now we're adding 30, okay? If we're adding 30%, then the new price is going to be 130% of $15. The 100% is 15. This 30 right here is the increase. And so I know that 130% times 15 is going to give me the new price, okay? Well, let's take 130%. Let's remember that changing this to a decimal, you can do that by moving the decimal 2 spots to the left, okay? So we get 1.3 is the decimal equivalent to 130%. Now I can take $15, I can multiply it by 1.3, and I'm going to get the cost of the new tickets, okay? Let's use the trick from the previous example. I have one digit to the right of the decimal. So I'm going to remember that. I have one space that I need to keep track of. And then I'm just going to do these as whole numbers with no decimals, because that's a little simpler to look at and think through. And when I'm done, I'm going to put that decimal back in. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. Placeholder 0, because now I'm in the tens place. 1 times 5 is 5. And I've already used this guy, so I'm going to cross him off. 1 times 1 is 1. All right, I'm going to add these together. and I get 195. But if you look back at the original problem, 15 times 1.3 cannot be that big. And the reason why is because we've got to remember to put this back in. Originally, we had 1 digit to the right of the decimal, so I need to go back and put the decimal in where I will have 1 digit. So that decimal point is going to go right here, and now I have 1 digit to the right of the decimal, just like I started with, and $19.50 is going to be the new price of the movie ticket with a 30% increase. Let's take a look at one last example with numbers that are a little bit bigger, and we'll call this last one, we'll call it good after this. Let's say that the average price of a house in a particular neighborhood is $300,000. And let's say that over the last 10 years, the housing market has been really crazy, and home prices in the last 10 years are up by 125%. That's the increase. That's not a 25% increase. That's a 125% increase, which means that the price of the home over the last 10 years would have more than doubled. Okay? What do we do with this? Average price was $300,000. That increase by itself is 125%. What's the new average price of a house? Well, we're going to start with recognizing that the 100% that we started with was the $300,000. How much did we go up? We went up 125%. If I add these together, I get 225%. Okay? That's the multiplier to use on the original price to get the new price. Well, I'm going to use the rule with decimals. I'm going to move it 2 spaces to the left, and my 225% is now the decimal 2.25. Okay? This is the multiplier to use on the average price at the beginning to calculate the new increased price. All right? $300,000, my goodness, it's a lot of zeros, okay? If I multiply by 2.25, what I'm gonna do, you can check this with a calculator if you want. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna break this up into 2 problems, just to show you another way to think about this. This is the same as 300,000 multiplied by 2 plus 0.25, which is a quarter. So I know that the answer to this problem is the same as 2 times 300,000 plus 0.25 times 300,000. And 0.25, if you think money, this is like a fourth, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is double it. 2 times 3 is 6, and then the zeros just come along for the ride. And then how do I do a quarter of 300,000? Well, 1/4 is the same as dividing something in half and then dividing it in half a second time. Cut something in half once, and then take your answer and cut it in half again, and that's the same as dividing by 4. So I'm going to take the original 300,000, and if I cut it in half, 300 cut in half is 150. Okay, zeros come along for the ride, and 150 cut in half is 75, and the zeros come along for the ride. Again, you don't have to do it this way. You can use a calculator if you want. It's good practice to do it by hand, but I just wanted to show you another way to think about this. So the quarter, the 0.25 times 300,000 is 75,000, and then we have our 2 times 300,000, which is 600,000. So if I put this over here, the new price, the new average price is $675,000, which is a 125% increase of 300,000. So again, just to recap, whatever you start with, if you have a percent increase, take that increase, add it to what you started with, and now you've got a new percentage that's a multiplier, convert it to a decimal, and multiply by what you started with, and you can calculate the new increased price. So you can see today how we calculated a percent increase, either by just doing it in one swoop or calculating what the increase was and then adding it to the original. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Go ahead and hit subscribe and send me any comments or other videos you'd like to see. Thanks again.